She stood in the doorway of what used to be my sewing room and said, "We'll need this space once you're gone. The furniture can stay, but everything else goes." I looked at her the way you look at a stranger. 3 days earlier, I had signed papers she didn't know existed. She thought I was too old to understand what was happening to me. She was wrong. The conference room smelled like lemon furniture polish and recycled air. I sat across from my attorney, Margaret Chen, watching her arrange documents in 3 neat stacks on the mahogany table between us. Sunlight came through the blinds in sharp horizontal lines, cutting the room into sections of light and shadow. The chair beneath me was leather and cold, even through my cardigan. Outside the window, I could see the courthouse clock tower and beyond it. The Ohio River moving slow and gray under October clouds. Margaret slid the first stack toward me. "This one transfers the house to the Community Land Trust." "Irrevocable. Your daughter-in-law can contest it, but she won't win. You're of sound mind. No coercion. And the trust has been operating in Cincinnati for 40 years. I picked up the pen. It was heavy, the kind that costs more than it should. The second stack, Margaret continued, her voice steady and without drama, establishes the life estate. You live there until you die or choose to leave. No one can remove you. No one can sell the property. No one can make decisions about your care, your space, or your belongings without your written consent. My son's face flashed through my mind, the way he looked at me last month when I asked about the property tax bill I couldn't find. Like I was a problem to be managed, like I was already gone. And the third, I asked. Margaret's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. The third is your will, new, clean, every item accounted for. The quilt collection goes to the Cincinnati Art Museum's Textile Archive. The teaching materials go to the school district. The savings account, what's left after legal fees, goes to the literacy foundation you worked with for 20 years. And my son gets exactly what he gave you when you needed him most. She paused. Nothing. I signed all 3 stacks. My handwriting was steady. The pen made a scratching sound against the paper that seemed too loud in the quiet room. When I finished, Margaret gathered the documents, tapped them against the table to align the edges, and looked at me the way a general looks at a soldier before battle. They're going to come at you hard when they find out, she said. I know. They'll say you were confused, manipulated. They'll cry and apologize and promise things will change. I know that too. She leaned back in her chair. Behind her, a framed law degree from Ohio State hung slightly crooked on the wall. Mrs. Holloway, in 30 years of practice, I've seen this exact situation maybe 200 times. The adult child who moves back home, the daughter-in-law who starts making comments about updates and square footage. The slow squeeze until the mother doesn't recognize her own life anymore. You know what I almost never see? I waited. The mother who acts before she's completely powerless. Margaret stood, extending her hand across the table. You're going to be fine, better than fine. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm and warm. As I walked out of that office and into the carpeted hallway that smelled like coffee from the break room, I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. I felt like I still owned my own name. Chapter 2, What I Built Before They Came. 4. 912 characters. I stood at the front of room 114 at Madison Elementary School on my first day of teaching in 1985. 23 faces looked up at me from desks arranged in rows I would later learn to curve into a horseshoe. The room smelled like chalk dust and floor wax and the particular mustiness of old textbooks. September light came through tall windows that overlooked the playground. And I could hear the 6th graders at recess, their voices carrying like birds. I taught there for 30 years, 3rd grade. 8 and 9-year-olds with missing teeth and untied shoes and questions about everything. I taught them to read with comprehension, to write with clarity, To think about words as tools they could use to build anything they wanted. Some of them came from houses where no one read to them. Some came hungry. Some came angry. I taught them all the same. In 1987, I bought my house with my teaching salary and a small inheritance from my mother. The mortgage officer sat across from me at National Bank of Commerce. A man named Douglas Pritchard, who kept glancing at my left hand like he was looking for permission from a husband who didn't exist. "This is a significant commitment for a single woman," he said. "I'm a teacher with tenure and a pension plan," I told him. "I'll be working until I'm 65. The math works." He approved the loan. I moved into 428 Sycamore Street 3 weeks later. I remember the hardware store where I bought my first lawnmower. How the clerk showed me how to check the oil and clean the blade. I remember the garden center where I bought the rose bushes I planted along the fence. How the owner, a woman named Pauline, taught me about mulch and fertilizer and the importance of deadheading. I remember standing in the paint aisle at the home improvement store, choosing colors for every room, no one to ask, no one to answer to. The house became mine in ways that had nothing to do with the deed. I knew which floorboard creaked near the bathroom. I knew the hot water took 40 seconds to reach the kitchen sink. I knew the afternoon light hit the living room at exactly 4:30 from March through September. My son was born in 1989 at Christ Hospital. I was 32. His father, my ex-husband, left when Tyler was 2, and after that it was just us. I raised him in that house, taught him to read at the kitchen table I bought at an estate sale on Madison Road. Walked him to the bus stop every morning until he was old enough to refuse. Sat in the bleachers at his basketball games at the middle school gym, cheering when he made a basket, staying silent when he missed. He went to Ohio University, studied business, graduated and moved to Columbus for a job in finance. We talked every Sunday for years. He visited at Christmas and Easter. It was enough. Then he lost his job in 2019. He called me from a corporate parking garage, his voice tight and strange. "They're downsizing. I've got 90 days to clear out." "Come home," I said. "Take time, figure out what's next." He arrived 3 weeks later. He didn't come alone. Her name was Jessica. She was younger than him by 5 years, sharp-featured and carefully dressed, with a way of smiling that never reached her eyes. They'd been dating for 8 months, she told me. Standing in my entryway with 2 suitcases and a sense of ownership I couldn't name yet. "This is temporary," Tyler said, "just until I land something new." I believed him. That first month, I came home from a faculty meeting at school to find my sewing room emptied of fabric and moved into the basement. Jessica was standing where my cutting table used to be, measuring the walls with a tape measure. "We needed a home office," she said, not looking at me. "You weren't using this space anyway." I should have said something then. Should have stood in that doorway and said, "This is my house, and you are a guest in it." But I didn't. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they were struggling. I told myself a mother's job was to make room. I didn't know yet that some people measure room not to fit inside it, but to take it over completely. We sat in a booth at the precinct, Tyler's choice. The kind of steakhouse with white tablecloths and waiters in black vests who appear and disappear like theater stagehands. It was my 70th birthday, October 2022. The restaurant hummed with the low noise of other people's celebrations. Silverware against plates, wine being poured. Laughter that sounded like it came from far away. Jessica sat across from me, her menu still closed. Tyler sat next to her, studying the wine list. I sat alone on my side of the booth, the leather seat cold beneath me, my hands folded on the table. "So," Jessica said, setting her water glass down with a small, precise click. "We wanted to talk to you about something important." I felt it before she said it. That particular quality of air before lightning strikes. Tyler cleared his throat. Mom, you're 70 now. That's a real milestone. And we've been thinking a lot about your future, about what makes sense. What makes sense, I repeated. Jessica leaned forward. The house is too much for you, all those stairs, the yard work. The upkeep. You're not getting any younger, and frankly, it's not safe for you to be living alone in a 3-bedroom house at your age. I've lived there for 35 years. Exactly, she said like I'd just proven her point. It's time to think about downsizing, moving somewhere more manageable. There are wonderful senior communities in Cincinnati, places with activities and social programs and on-site medical care. The waiter appeared. We ordered, he left. The conversation continued as if nothing had been interrupted. We've been looking into it, Tyler said. His voice had the rehearsed quality of someone who'd practiced this speech. There's a place in Montgomery, nice, Klein. You'd have your own apartment, and they have a shuttle that goes to the grocery store twice a week. I looked at my son, tried to find the child I'd raised in the man sitting across from me. You want me to sell my house and move into a senior facility. We want you to be safe, Jessica said. And the truth is, Tyler and I are thinking about our future too. We want to start a family, we need space. And that house, your house, it's sitting there, all that equity, all that potential, and you're just in it. Alone's getting older. The word just landed like a stone. Tyler reached across the table. I pulled my hands into my lap before he could touch them. Mom, this benefits everyone. You get a safe place with people your age. We get a chance to build something. The house gets used properly. It's win-win. You want my house. We want you taken care of, Jessica corrected. Her voice was patient, the way you talk to a child who won't put on their coat. And we want to stop worrying about you falling down those stairs, or forgetting to lock the doors, or, God forbid, something happening and no one finding you for days. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was wearing a silk blouse the color of champagne and pearl earrings that caught the light when she moved. Her nails were manicured, her hair was professionally colored. She had never worked a day in a classroom with someone else's children. Had never patched a roof or planted a garden or scraped together a down payment. I'm not moving, I said. Tyler's face changed. Mom. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable. I'm 70, not 90. I'm healthy. I'm independent. I own my home outright. There is no reason for me to leave it. Jessica's smile finally dropped. There's every reason. You're being selfish. Tyler and I have put our lives on hold to take care of you. I never asked you to move in. You offered. I offered temporary help. You've been there for 3 years. The food arrived. We sat in silence while the waiter arranged plates, steak, potatoes. Vegetables I wouldn't eat. When he left, Jessica picked up her fork and said, very quietly, we're going to have this conversation again. And again, until you understand what's best for everyone. I cut my steak. It was perfectly cooked and tasted like nothing. On the drive home, sitting in the back seat of Tyler's car while they talked to each other in the front, I watched the city lights blur past and understood something I should have understood months ago. They didn't see me as a person anymore. I was a problem to solve. An obstacle to remove, furniture that needed to be cleared out to make room for the life they wanted to build. That night, I looked up attorneys who specialized in elder law. I made a list. And the next morning, while they were both at job interviews they'd scheduled in the same building on purpose, so I'd be alone, I made a phone call to a woman named Margaret Chen. The notary office sat between a nail salon and a tax preparer in a strip mall off Route 50. I pushed through the glass door into a small lobby that smelled like printer toner and the artificial vanilla of a plug-in air freshener. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly. A woman in her 50s sat behind a desk with a nameplate that read Diane Kowalski, Notary Public. Mrs. Holloway, she asked. Yes. Margaret Chen sent your documents over this morning. I've reviewed everything. Do you have your identification? I handed her my driver's license. She examined it, then me, then it again. Behind her, a small window looked out onto the parking lot where 3 cars sat baking in the afternoon heat. A radio played softly from somewhere I couldn't see. Talk radio, 2 men arguing about football. Diane pulled out the documents. They were thick, maybe 30 pages total, held together with a black binder clip. She removed the clip and spread the papers across her desk in a sequence I didn't understand, but that clearly meant something to her. This is a significant transfer of assets, she said, not unkindly. I need to ask you some questions. It's part of my job. Are you comfortable answering? Yes. Are you signing these documents of your own free will? I am. Has anyone pressured you, threatened you, or coerced you in any way? No. Do you understand that by signing these documents, you are transferring ownership of your property at 428 Sycamore Street to the Greater Cincinnati Community Land Trust, and that this transfer is irrevocable? I understand. Do you understand that you are retaining a life estate, which means you can live in the property until your death or until you choose to vacate, but that you cannot sell it, and it cannot be inherited by your heirs? I understand that too. Diane looked at me for a long moment. The air conditioning kicked on with a rattle and a hum. Cool air drifted down from a vent directly above us. Mrs. Holloway, I have to tell you, I've been doing this for 23 years. I've notarized a lot of property transfers. And I've seen situations where adult children try to take advantage of elderly parents. If you're doing this because you feel like you have no other choice, there are resources. People who can help. I'm not being taken advantage of, I said. I'm preventing it. Something shifted in her expression. She nodded once, picked up her notary stamp, and positioned the first document in front of me. Then let's make it official. I signed my name 11 times. Diane witnessed each signature, stamped each page, recorded each action in a leather-bound log that looked like it had been used for decades. The sound of the stamp hitting paper was heavy and final, thunk, thunk, thunk. When we finished, she slid the documents into a manila envelope and sealed it. Margaret will file these with the county by end of business today. Once they're recorded, it's done. Do you have any questions? I had one. How long before someone could challenge this? They can challenge it any time. But to overturn it, they'd need to prove you were mentally incompetent, under duress, or the victim of fraud. Based on this conversation, none of those things are true. You're sharp. You're clear about what you're doing and why. Unless your son has evidence you've been diagnosed with dementia or that someone held a gun to your head in this office. These documents will stand. I stood, and my purse felt heavier than it should have, though nothing inside it had changed. Thank you, Mrs. Holloway, Diane said as I reached the door. I turned back. She was still seated, her hands folded on the desk, her face serious. Whatever happened to make you do this, I'm sorry. No one should have to protect themselves from their own family. I didn't correct her. I walked out into the heat of the parking lot, got into my car, and sat there for 5 minutes with the windows down and the engine off. The nail salon next door had its door propped open, and I could hear music playing inside. Something pop and upbeat that didn't match the weight of what I'd just done. Tyler and Jessica were at a realtor's office across town. They'd told me they were looking at houses for themselves, but I'd seen the folder Jessica left open on the counter. Photos of senior living facilities, floor plans for one-bedroom apartments, brochures with smiling old people playing cards in sunny common rooms. They thought they were planning my future. They had no idea I'd just locked them out of it permanently. I started the car. The air conditioning blasted hot air for 30 seconds before it turned cold. As I pulled out of the parking lot and onto Route 50, heading west toward home, I thought about the look on Diane's face when I said I was preventing something, not escaping it. She understood some battles you don't fight by arguing. You fight them by signing your name in the right place at the right time and then never mentioning it again until it's too late for anyone to stop you. I sat in the reading room at the Public Library of Cincinnati and Hamilton County. Third floor, West Wing, where the light came in golden through tall windows that overlooked Vine Street. The room smelled like old paper and the particular silence of a place where people come to disappear into other worlds. My book was open in front of me, something about the history of Appalachian quilting, but I wasn't reading it. I was thinking it had been 2 weeks since I signed the papers. Tyler and Jessica didn't know. Margaret had filed everything with the county recorder's office on a Wednesday afternoon. The house was no longer mine to give them. It would never be theirs to take. And I had said nothing. At home, I moved through my days like nothing had changed. I made coffee in the morning. I watered the rose bushes. I sorted through old teaching materials in the basement, boxing up things I'd already decided would go to the school district. Jessica watched me from the kitchen doorway one afternoon, her arms crossed, her expression calculating. "You're getting rid of things," she said. "I'm decluttering. At my age, it's responsible." She smiled. It was the smile of someone who thinks they're winning. "That's smart, Alina, really smart. It'll make the transition so much easier." I didn't ask which transition she meant. I already knew. That Sunday, I drove to yoga class at the YMCA on Brotherton Road. I'd been going for 6 years, same teacher, same Sunday morning slot. I wasn't very good at it. My knees didn't bend the way they used to. And my balance was suspect, but I liked the quiet of it. The way the instructor, a woman named Marion, talked about breathing and letting go and being present. I lay on my mat in Savasana, the final resting pose, while Marion's voice floated through the dim room. "Release what no longer serves you. Make space for what comes next." What no longer served me was pretending my son still saw me as his mother instead of as an inconvenient landlord. After class, I sat in my car in the YMCA parking lot and made a phone call to an estate sale company. The woman who answered had a brisk, efficient voice. I told her I needed an appraisal of my personal property, furniture, collectibles, household goods. "Not for sale yet, just an inventory. Planning ahead?" she asked. "Something like that." She came to the house on a Tuesday when Tyler and Jessica were both gone, him at a networking event. Her at a spa day she'd charged to a credit card I didn't consign. The appraiser walked through every room with a tablet and a measuring tape, photographing things, making notes. When she finished, she sat at my dining room table and showed me the numbers. "Your quilt collection alone is worth approximately $18,000. The Depression glass, another $4,000. The mid-century furniture, if it's in the condition you say it is, maybe $12,000. Everything else, books, kitchenware, linens, personal items, another $6,000. Total value around $40,000. I thought about Jessica standing in my sewing room with a tape measure. Thought about her saying the furniture could stay, like it was hers to decide. "If you were to liquidate," the appraiser said, "I'd recommend doing it in stages. The quilts and glass to specialty buyers, the furniture through a curated estate sale. The rest through donation for the tax write-off." I thanked her. She left me a folder with all the documentation. I hid it in the bottom drawer of my dresser, under sweaters I hadn't worn in years. The next week, I went to lunch with my friend Dorothea at a diner on Montgomery Road. We sat in a booth near the window, the kind with cracked red vinyl and a table that wobbled unless you folded a napkin under one leg. Dorothea had taught 4th grade at Madison Elementary until she retired in 2018. We'd been friends for 40 years. "You're different," she said, stirring sugar into her iced tea. "Different how?" "Calmer. Like you made a decision about something and you're not second-guessing it. I cut into my club sandwich. Maybe I did. Does it have to do with Tyler? Dorothea was the only person I'd told about the sewing room. About the birthday dinner, about the brochures. I'd shown her everything in fragments, the way you show someone a wound you're not ready to treat yet. It has to do with me, I said. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her fingers were warm and strong. Good. It's about damn time. At home that evening, I found Jessica sitting on the couch with her laptop open, scrolling through real estate listings. She didn't look up when I came in, just browsing, she said. Thinking about what we could do with this place, open concept kitchen. Knock out that wall between the living room and dining room, new floors throughout. It has so much potential. I set my purse down. It's not your house to renovate. Not yet, she said. And then she looked at me, really looked at me, with an expression that was half pity and half impatience. But let's be honest, Alina, how much longer are you really planning to stay here? Another year, too. Eventually you'll need more help than Tyler and I can provide, and when that happens, this house will need to go to someone who can actually use it. I walked past her without responding. Went to my bedroom, closed the door. From my window I could see the garden. The roses were finished for the season, their blooms long gone, but the bushes were still green and strong. I'd planted them in 1992. They'd survived droughts and floods and winters that killed everything else. Jessica thought I was too old to fight back. She was about to learn that surviving 70 years teaches you exactly one thing. Patience is a weapon. I stood at the counter of the county recorder's office in the Hamilton County Courthouse, waiting while the clerk searched her computer system. The office smelled like old paper and floor cleaner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Behind the counter, rows of filing cabinets stretched back into shadows. Decades of property records stacked in drawers and boxes, and digital files that replaced the ones that came before. The clerk, a young woman with red hair pulled into a tight bun, squinted at her screen. Okay, I've got it. 428 Sycamore Street, Cincinnati, 45,202. Transferred to Greater Cincinnati Community Land Trust on October 18th. Recorded October 19th. Life estate retained by Alina Marie Holloway. She looked up. That's you. That's me. And you need certified copies. 3 copies. Certified. She typed something and a printer behind her started humming. While we waited, an elderly man came in and asked about property tax records for a house his father had owned in 1963. The clerk helped him patiently, pulling files from a reference binder, writing down names and case numbers on a yellow pad. When my documents were ready, the clerk stamped each one with a raised seal that left an impression in the heavy paper. She slid them across the counter in a large envelope. That'll be $45. I paid in cash, folded the envelope carefully and put it in my purse. Outside, I sat on the courthouse steps in the October cold. The river was visible between buildings, slate gray under a sky that threatened rain. People moved past me, lawyers in dark suits, families headed to the clerk's office, a woman crying quietly into her phone. I opened my purse and looked at the envelope, 3 certified copies of the deed. One for Margaret, one for the land trust, one for me to keep somewhere Tyler and Jessica would never find it. I walked 3 blocks to a FedEx store on 4th Street. The clerk there helped me pack the first copy into an overnight envelope addressed to Margaret's office. I dropped it in the outgoing slot and watched it disappear. The second copy went into a safety deposit box I'd rented at a bank branch I'd never used before. 5th 3rd on Walnut Street. The bank officer who helped me was professional and incurious. She led me to the vault, showed me how to use the key, left me alone in a small room with the box. I placed the document inside along with a copy of my updated will, and a letter I'd written to Dorothea explaining everything in case something happened to me. The third copy I brought home. I arrived at 4:30. The house was empty. Tyler was at an interview. Jessica had left a note on the counter, out with friends. Back late. Don't wait up. I went to the basement, to the storage area behind the furnace, where I kept Christmas decorations and old teaching supplies. I pulled out a cardboard box labeled Textbooks 1998 that hadn't been opened in 20 years. Inside were outdated reading primers and workbooks I'd saved for no good reason. I placed the certified deed at the bottom of the box, under the books, and put the box back exactly where it had been. Then I went upstairs and made myself dinner: grilled cheese sandwich, tomato soup. I ate at the kitchen table, listening to the house settle around me. The furnace kicked on, the refrigerator hummed. Outside, the light faded to blue and then to black. At 7 o'clock, Tyler came home. He looked tired, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled. How'd the interview go? I asked. Fine, good. They'll let me know in a week. He opened the refrigerator, stared at the contents, closed it again without taking anything. He stood there with his hands still on the handle, his back to me. Mom, we need to talk. About what? He turned. About the house, about your future. Jessica and I have been patient, but we can't keep putting our lives on hold. We need to make a plan, a real plan, something with dates and commitments. I folded my hands on the table. What kind of plan? We've found a place, a senior community in Montgomery. It's really nice, Mom. They have a unit available starting in January. We could move you right after the holidays, get you settled. Put the house on the market in the spring when it's worth the most. And what happens to me while the house is on the market? You'll be in your apartment, safe, taken care of. And you and Jessica will live here. We'll manage the sale, handle the repairs and staging. It makes sense. I looked at my son. He was 43 years old. He had my eyes and his father's jawline, and an expression I didn't recognize anymore, something hard and certain, and completely closed to negotiation. I'm not moving to Montgomery, I said. Mom, I'm not moving anywhere. This is my house, I'm staying in it. His face changed. The tiredness fell away, replaced by something sharper. You don't have a choice. You can't maintain this place. You can't afford to live here on your pension alone if something goes wrong. You're being stubborn and irresponsible, and frankly, I'm done asking nicely. You're done asking. We've been more than patient, more than generous. We've given you time to come to terms with reality. That time is over. You're moving in January whether you like it or not. I stood, picked up my plate and bowl, walked them to the sink, rinsed them carefully, and put them in the dishwasher. When I turned back, Tyler was still standing there, waiting for me to argue or cry or beg. You should know something, I said. I saw an attorney 4 weeks ago. I made some changes, legal changes. You might want to ask Jessica if she's interested in hearing about them. His face went pale. What kind of changes? The kind that makes sure I'm protected. Protected from what? From people who look at me and see real estate. I walked past him and went to my bedroom. Closed the door, turned off the light, lay down in the dark and listened to him call Jessica. Listened to the rise and fall of their voices through the wall. Sharp and panicked and starting to understand that something had gone very wrong with their plan. Tomorrow they would find out exactly what I'd done. But tonight, in the dark, in my own bed, in my own house that would be mine until the day I died, I slept better than I had in 3 years. Jessica's voice carried across the parking lot of the real estate office on Madison Road. I wasn't there, but Dorothea was. She'd been driving past on her way to the grocery store when she saw Jessica's car parked at an angle across 2 spaces. Saw her standing in the cold October morning, screaming into her phone. Dorothea called me 20 minutes later. She knows, she said. I don't know how, but she knows. I was sitting on a bench at the Cincinnati Nature Center, on the wooden platform that overlooks the meadow where goldfinches come in the fall. The air was cold and sharp and smelled like dried leaves. The bench was damp from overnight rain, but I didn't mind. I'd brought a cushion. I'd come here the morning after I told Tyler, knowing I didn't want to be home when they started making calls. What did you hear? I asked Dorothea. Enough. She was talking to someone, Tyler. I think saying something about a land trust and fraudulent transfer and how you didn't have the mental capacity to sign legal documents. She used the word lawyer about 6 times in 30 seconds. I watched a goldfinch land on a dried sunflower stalk 20 feet from where I sat. Its feathers were the color of butter and coal. Are you okay? Dorothea asked. I'm fine. Where are you? Somewhere quiet. I heard her smile through the phone. Good, stay there. I hung up, turned off my phone, sat in the silence in the cold and watched the birds. By noon, Tyler had called Margaret's office 4 times. Margaret told me this later, her voice amused and unsurprised. He demanded to see the deed transfer, demanded an explanation. Demanded to know what kind of lawyer helps an old woman give away her assets to strangers. I told him I help competent adults protect themselves from financial exploitation, Margaret said. He didn't like that. They went to the county recorder's office next. I heard about this from the clerk with red hair, who recognized my name when I came back the following week to get parking validation. Your son and his wife were here, she said. They wanted to see the deed. I showed them. The wife started crying, said something about how you'd been tricked. Your son asked if there was any way to reverse the filing. I told him no. What did he say? He didn't say anything, he just walked out. But the wife, she stood there for a minute, looking at the document like, if she stared at it long enough it would change. Then she asked me if there was a manager she could speak to. I told her I was the manager. I thanked her, she shrugged. I see it all the time. Adult kids who think they're entitled to their parents' property. Usually the parents don't figure it out until it's too late. You did good. From the nature center, I drove to a greenhouse in Anderson Township, a place I'd never been before. It was warm inside and smelled like soil and green things growing. I walked between tables of orchids and ferns and winter herbs, touching leaves, breathing air that felt alive. A woman in a canvas apron asked if I needed help. I'm moving soon, I said. I want to know what plants would do well in a small apartment with east-facing windows. She showed me pothos and philodendrons, succulents that didn't need much light. A small jade plant that was supposed to bring good luck. I bought the jade plant and a ceramic pot painted with blue flowers. When I got home at 2 o'clock, Tyler's car was in the driveway. So was a car I didn't recognize, a black sedan with county plates. I walked in carrying the jade plant. Tyler sat on the couch. Jessica sat next to him, her face blotchy and red. A man in a suit stood near the window. He turned when I came in. Mrs. Holloway, I'm David Brennan from Adult Protective Services. Your son called our office with concerns about your welfare. I set the plant down on the hall table. What concerns? He believes you may have been the victim of financial exploitation. That you signed over your property under duress or diminished capacity. I looked at Tyler. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I signed those documents of my own free will, I said. I was evaluated by my attorney. I understood exactly what I was doing. That may be true, Brennan said carefully. But when family members express concern, we're obligated to investigate. I'd like to ask you some questions, just routine, to make sure you're safe and making informed decisions. We sat at the dining room table. He asked me my name, my birth date, the current president, what year it was. He asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. He asked me why I'd transferred the property. To protect it, I said. And myself. From what? I looked at Tyler and Jessica, sitting side by side on my couch in my house that was no longer mine to give them. From people who confused love with ownership. Brennan wrote something in his notebook. After 15 minutes, he stood. Mrs. Holloway, you're clearly competent. You understand your decisions. I see no evidence of exploitation or diminished capacity. I'll file a report that closes this case. Jessica made a sound like something breaking. After Brennan left, Tyler finally looked at me. How could you do this? How could you try to take my home? We were trying to help you. You were trying to help yourselves. Jessica stood. Her hands were shaking. You've ruined everything. We had plans. We had a future. And you just threw it all away out of spite. I threw away nothing, I said quietly. I kept what was mine. They left that night, packed their things in garbage bags and suitcases and boxes from the basement. They didn't say goodbye. Jessica took one last look around the living room like she was memorizing everything she'd lost, and then they were gone. I stood in the empty house. The jade plant sat on the hall table in its blue pot, small and green and alive. The community garden plot measured 20 feet by 30 feet. Tucked into the southeast corner of the shared space at the Northside Urban Agriculture Collective. I stood at its edge on a morning in late April, 7 months after Tyler and Jessica left, looking at soil that was finally warm enough to plant. I joined the collective in February, paid my dues, attended the orientation. Met the other gardeners, people who grew tomatoes and beans and flowers. People who came here to dig in the earth and remember what it felt like to make something grow. My plot had been assigned by lottery. I was lucky, the coordinator said, south-facing. Good drainage. The previous tenant had built raised beds that were still in good shape. I planted tomatoes and basil and marigolds, cucumbers along a trellis I bought at the hardware store. Zinnias for cutting. Every morning I came here before the heat rose, weeded and watered and watched things grow. The soil smelled dark and rich. My hands remembered this work from years ago, from the garden at Sycamore Street that was no longer mine to tend. The house had been deeded to the land trust, but I still lived there under the life estate. Nothing about my daily life had changed, except everything about who controlled it. I paid a small monthly fee to the trust for property taxes and insurance. I maintained the house. When the roof leaked in March, the trust hired someone to fix it. When the furnace needed service, they handled it. I lived there the same way I'd always lived there. Except now I lived there protected by a legal structure Tyler couldn't touch. He'd tried, of course. In December, he'd hired a lawyer who sent Margaret a letter claiming I'd been mentally incompetent when I signed the deed. Margaret responded with a letter attaching the notary's statement, the APS report, and a politely worded threat to file a motion for sanctions if they continued to make frivolous claims. The lawyer withdrew. Tyler didn't hire another one. Jessica left him in February. I heard it from Dorothea, who heard it from someone at church. She'd moved back to Columbus, back to her parents' house. Back to whatever life she'd had before she decided my home was her future. Tyler moved into an apartment in Oakley. He didn't call, didn't write, didn't come by. In March, I donated my quilt collection to the Cincinnati Art Museum. They sent a curator to the house to evaluate them. She spent 3 hours photographing and cataloging, and when she finished, she told me the collection would be archived and some pieces would be displayed in their textile rotation. Your work will outlive all of us, she said. I gave my teaching materials to Madison Elementary. Boxes of books and manipulatives and lesson plans I'd developed over 30 years. The new third-grade teacher, a young woman named Amanda who couldn't have been more than 25, cried when she saw the guided reading sets. These are exactly what I needed, she said. I sold the depression glass at an estate sale in April. Kept 3 pieces, a green candy dish my mother had given me, a pink plate I'd bought at a flea market in 1994, a cream pitcher that caught the light in a way that made me happy. Everything else went to collectors who would value it more than I did. The money from all of it, the quilts, were a donation. But the glass and furniture brought in almost $30,000, went into an account I designated for the Literacy Foundation. When I died, they'd get whatever was left, not Tyler, not Jessica. Not anyone who'd ever looked at me and seen something to be managed. In May, on a Tuesday afternoon, Tyler showed up at the garden. I was kneeling in the dirt, transplanting basil seedlings, when I saw him standing at the edge of my plot. He looked thinner, older. He was wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt, no suit, no polished shoes. "Mom," he said. I sat back on my heels. "Tyler, can we talk?" I gestured to the ground. He hesitated, then sat, his legs folded awkwardly, his hands loose in his lap. "I'm sorry," he said. I waited. "I'm sorry for what Jessica and I did. What we tried to do. I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't safe in your own home. I'm sorry for," his voice cracked, "I'm sorry for forgetting who you were." Who was I? My mother. The person who taught me to read, who worked 2 jobs to send me to college, who let me come home when I lost everything and never made me feel like a failure. He looked at the garden, at the neat rows of plants, at the marigolds blooming bright orange against the dark soil. I forgot all of that. I let Jessica convince me you were a problem instead of a person. And I'm sorry. I pulled off my garden gloves. Are you asking me to forgive you? I'm asking you to let me try to be your son again. I thought about it. About the years of Sunday phone calls and Christmas visits. About the boy who used to help me plant bulbs in the fall. About the man who'd stood in a steakhouse and told me I was too old to make my own decisions. "I don't know if I can trust you again," I said. "I know. And I won't change what I did. The house will never be yours. My things will never be yours. I've made my plans and they're final. I understand. But if you want to visit me like a son visits his mother, if you want to come to dinner and tell me about your life and listen when I tell you about mine, then you can do that." He nodded. He didn't cry, but his eyes were wet. He left after 20 minutes. I went back to planting. The soil was warm under my hands. The sun was bright overhead. In the plot next to mine, a woman named Cheryl was staking tomato plants, and she waved at me when she saw me looking. I waved back. There's a specific kind of pain that comes from discovering the people you loved most never saw you clearly. Not as you were, not as you are. They saw a version of you that served their needs, the mother who gives, the woman who makes room, the elder who steps aside gracefully when her usefulness expires. And when you refuse to be that version, when you insist on being the whole complicated person you've always been, they call it stubbornness, selfishness, confusion. But here's what I learned. Clarity looks like confusion to people who need you to stay small. For 3 years, I let them make me smaller. I let Jessica rearrange my rooms and Tyler speak to me like I was a child who needed simple explanations. I let them plan my future in conversations I wasn't included in restaurants where they ordered for me, in looks they exchanged across tables when they thought I wasn't watching. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself they meant well. I told myself a mother's love meant making space, even when there was no space left to give. I was wrong. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. Love doesn't measure your worth by how much you're willing to surrender. Love doesn't show up after 3 years of taking and say, "We need to talk about what's best for you," while meaning, "We need to talk about what we want from you." That's not love, that's negotiation, and I spent 70 years learning the difference. I think about the women I taught with, the ones who retired and moved into their children's guest rooms and slowly faded into background noise in their own lives. The ones who signed over power of attorney, because it seemed easier than fighting. The ones who gave away houses and savings and independence because someone told them it was time and they believed it. I think about how many of them called it love, and I think about the ones who didn't. The ones who kept their names on their deeds, and their money in their own accounts, and their decisions in their own hands. The ones their children called difficult, stubborn, impossible. The ones who lived exactly as long as they wanted in exactly the places they chose, and left behind exactly what they intended to leave. Those women weren't loved less, they were just respected more. I'm not angry at Tyler anymore. Anger requires energy I don't want to spend. What I feel is something quieter and harder to name, a kind of sorrow for the relationship we could have had if he'd seen me as a person instead of as a problem. And a kind of relief that I saved myself before it was too late. Because here's the truth no one tells you about getting older: you don't get weaker. You get clearer. The things that used to seem complicated, whether to forgive, whether to stay, whether to fight, become simple. You learn to ask one question about every relationship, every decision, every offer of help. Does this make me smaller or larger in my own life? If the answer is smaller, you walk away, even if it's your son, even if it's family. Even if people call you selfish for choosing yourself, I chose myself. I chose the house I'd earned and the life I'd built and the future I wanted instead of the future someone else had planned for me. And I did it not by fighting, not by arguing, not by pleading my case in 1,000 exhausting conversations that would have gone nowhere. I did it by signing my name on a piece of paper in a strip mall notary office on a Tuesday afternoon, and then saying nothing until it was too late for anyone to stop me. That's the other thing about getting older. You learn that power doesn't always look like power. Sometimes it looks like patience, like silence, like a woman who nods and smiles and makes no promises while she quietly moves every piece of her life into a position no one else can touch. People ask me if I'm lonely now, if I regret what I did. If I wish I'd handled things differently, I tell them the truth. I sleep better now than I have in years. I wake up in my own house, the house I bought with my own money. The house I filled with my own choices. The house no one can take from me, and I make coffee in a kitchen that belongs to me, and I sit in morning light that I chose, and I feel something I didn't feel for 3 years. I feel like myself. That's not loneliness, that's freedom. And if the cost of that freedom was losing a relationship that was already lost, that had become a transaction disguised as love, then I didn't lose anything. I saved everything that mattered. The life I have now is smaller in some ways, quieter. I have fewer people in it, but the people who remain see me, really see me. Not as someone to manage or plan around or wait out, as a leaner, 70 years old. Clear-eyed, still here, still choosing. And that, in the end, is what I want every woman my age to know. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to protect what you built. It's never too late to look at the people who claim to love you and ask them to prove it by respecting the boundaries you set. If they can't, they were never yours to lose. This has been Grandma's last word. If this story stayed with you, subscribe, because every week, another woman's quiet strength deserves to be heard.